Hello, welcome to Sustainable Sailing. I'm back on the boat. This picture shows the weekend we've just had in Cornwall. That's on the Hall Walk at Foy. For a brilliant video of that, go and see Sailing Cadoa, and I'll put a link in the description. So back on the boat, and this is a video of what I was doing last week to do with the battery box. This week is going to be building the solar panel supports, so look for that video next week. It's Tuesday 7th of June. Today I'm still working on the battery box, and I'm putting in the 4 glands that will take the battery cables, 2 on that higher level and 2 on that lower level. They will take the battery cables, positive and negative, for 2 banks through to the motor room. It's proving a bit tricky because I should have done it before putting in this bulkhead, as the drill won't fit with a long drill bit for those lower ones. Plus, the space is tight on this side. Now, the ones for the ones for the upper battery set have come through there. That's fine. The ones for the lower battery set come through this extra end of motor room bulkhead. It was really there with a drip tray originally for the catching the oil, obviously strength as well. So the hole comes through just there, but there's a gap before the bulkhead. What I need to do is drill that first bulkhead with a hole saw that's large enough to fit the entire gland case through, and then drill a smaller hole from this side through for the actual cable to go through. This is where things are very fortunate, having an electric motor and a removable cockpit floor, because in a moment I'm just going to take out the whole cockpit floor. We've been doing this a lot, so it's not bolted down at the moment, and use the man overboard block and tackle to a point we've mounted in the top of the wheelhouse, and I can just lift the motor completely out of the way so that I can fit down in there and sort out those glands. So this is what the glands look like. Foam washer, which will go against the bulkhead first. That is then screwed to the bulkhead permanently. The bung needs to have a 19mm hole drilled in it. The cable is 17mm diameter. It needs to be plus 2mm. I've got a 19mm drill bit coming tomorrow, and then this pops on to squeeze the gland. So that bung is tapered, it goes in there, and when that is bolted tight onto there, the gland will be squeezed around the cable. 4 of those to go on the motor side. The good news is that I can fit the crimped connector through these holes. So the only bit that will need to be threaded onto the wire before putting the ends on will be the rubber bung. That's brilliant, because it means I can actually build the cable, do the crimping out of the motor room, and then put it in when I'm finished. 2 of the holes are done. I'm using a 25mm flat bit, which is smaller diameter than any of those, for putting the cable through. Let's get the motor out of the way into the cockpit, and then carry on making the holes and fitting these glands. Okay, I'm in the motor room underneath the motor, which I've tied doubly securely. Sorry if you can hear the hum, that's the Victron transformer. These 2 are the mounting for the grommet for the upper battery compartment, and I've had to cut this access area through this bulkhead for the 2 there. I did a mistake, so I've had to plug that, and I'll epoxy that. They were just too close together to get the grommets on. I'm going to, as I say, epoxy the inside of all of them and apply some thickened epoxy to the joint here which has been epoxied from the other side and taped from the other side, but I thought I might as well put some thickened epoxy in there while I'm at it. Apart from putting them a bit too close together, my only other problem is that two of the cover retaining bolts have fallen down there somewhere, so I've got to clear the cockpit locker, which unfortunately has all the moulding for the tow rail sitting on top of that black waste tank, and I think the bolts are just down there and I should be able to clear it and get them. It's taken ages just to keep crawling in and out of the space, getting the tools and so on, but at least those two are looking good, and once the epoxy's on and dried I'll be able to fit those two, hopefully in the process not falling down this very deep and narrow bilge which currently has a puddle at the bottom of it. Okay, that's where we're at after most of a day's work. It's Wednesday's update from Dave's hole in the bottom of the boat. Let's have a look at where we've got to today. Okay, forward battery compartment now has a cleat there to support the floor, and some thickened epoxy that had leaked through from when we've seen that joint has been sanded there and there, so that the board for the upper battery rests smoothly. Ooh, let's look aft. This next battery again cleaned up the thickened epoxy there so it rests flat, and put in that cleat and this upper cleat. So this one is a bit wider, and we've got that bit there so that the floor is the same width, but because of having this cleat here to support the lower level of floor, we needed it a bit wider to still get the battery in. So that one's been done. This one is now properly flat, and so is that one, and so is that edge. And then I've taken up the galley floor because our beams need to be just a few millimeters lower than they used to be in order to support the slightly thicker floor. What I've done so far is we've got a new drain hole there, so that this side bilge that will go all the way up to the mast can drain out into the motor compartment and the deep bilge at the bottom of it. And then it's this. So what I'm going to do here is put a, well, I fitted this one here. That's the right height to rest another piece the same going in that direction there and there on it, and be the right level to rest the floor on. What I'm planning to do is to essentially square off at the point where I can get a flat base for the 18mm floor and run alongside that middle one, alongside the end, alongside there, but also alongside there. And we're going to take the floor right the way under the counter, and as I say, that will make it so it's a rectangular floor area here, which is going to make putting the floor covering on a lot easier. That will lift up in this section here, which is deep enough to store some things in the wet bilge, and there'll be a hatch to give access to that lower area there. And then across that edge where it curves slightly, there will be a piece of ply that's chamfered and is epoxied in permanently. So that will be level at floor level. It will provide the floor edge right to the hull with nowhere for dirt or water to get in, and then the floor here will butt to it. Our floor covering, we think, is going to be slightly flexible, so we'll have this removable panel covered with the floor covering, and then a piece that goes over that fixed in bit right the way up to the stringer that will be there permanently. Meanwhile, phone going crazy again, so I'll cut off for today. Hi, Welcome to Thursday lunchtime, and I am a hot sticky mess, struggling with the asymmetry of boats and the awkward shapes. As I was trying to fit the floor in one place, it's meant consequences elsewhere which have then been made difficult because nothing is the same side to side. Let me show you what I mean. Let's start with where I wanted to be working, which is this galley floor, and in particular fitting the new beams that are going to go across. So there's going to be 3 of those, and they need to be a little bit lower than the last ones, and obviously getting the length right so that they taper into the hull, get a nice chunky bit of support onto the hull is critical. And that means I need to level from there to there so that my whole floor is level. My problem was, unless I wanted to waste a lot of wood making custom levels, I needed to take up the floor and the beams from the chart table area at the beginning of the corridor because they're slightly higher. As I was taking up those, I thought, well, this would be a good time to put the drain in there to match the one I did over there the other day. This one, however, turns out to be challengingly different, so it's meant I've had to take out the floor for the moment in the corridor because the engine bearer is so much closer to this bulkhead on this side. There's no gap, so even if I've drilled through this bulkhead, which is made more complicated because of this post, the water isn't going to drain from here down that gap and into the deep bilge. Getting the hole through to here has meant drilling a hole down from here to meet it, and I've achieved that now. And what I think I'm going to do is, there's a limber hole at the bottom there going that way, so I'm going to open that up to the same diameter and then bizarrely, water can collect in these 3 spaces to the side of the engine bearer, and unless it gets high enough to go round the aft end, it just sits there. So I'm going to open up a limber hole through the engine bearer that way as well, so this side the water will come from that drain there, through here, through that brace for the engine bearer, and then down into the deeper bilge. Obviously, as I'm cutting away this fiberglass coated timber, I'm taking away some strength. I really don't think that corner's very significant, but I'm also taking away the water protection of the fiberglass from that timber. So we will make sure that everything gets coated with epoxy to be a nice smooth flow for water once we're done. It just takes so long to get yourself into the difficult corners. I had to use the hole saw extension on the drill because my drill doesn't fit. Well, my drill plus my hand doesn't fit in that space, so I've got this extension that came with the hole saws, but even so I had to cut away that little corner there so that the actual drill trigger would fit. Anyway, it's very slow but making some progress, and one of the things to highlight is that I'm fairly basic when it comes to timber work, so this is not going to be beautifully jointed a la Aladino. This will be very basic overkill in terms of sizes and amount of timber in order to get the strength that I could probably get through clever joints if I was a better carpenter. Okay, it will be nice when it's done, and it will mean we can have this whole side to side properly floored as a fairly early job, and that is the most complicated area. Possibly that corridor is as complicated, but this is one of those areas where it's made so complicated by the shape of the hull coming up, so your floorboard supports have to taper into almost nothing, and every single one is different because the hull has a curve there. Still, slow but onward progress, and it's it's one of those things where you've started working on just a battery box here in the middle, but that has consequences for elsewhere. Yeah, getting on with those, and it will be nice to have at least one area that is properly floored, and we can show you our fancy floor covering that we're planning for the whole boat, probably a bit sooner, because we don't leave the timber exposed for very long. Okay, enough waffling, better get on with it. I thought it's about time I made myself a coffee using my AeroPress to keep me going. The only problem is, where am I going to be able to sit to drink it? Oops. This will be the last update for this video because it's 4 o'clock on Thursday. Jane's on her way and we're heading home and then to Cornwall for the weekend to see family. I've got my first 3 cross beams for the galley floor nearly correctly level. A little bit more taken off, needs to be taken off the slopes at that end on them. I mentioned that I'm not going to be doing half joints. You can see the cutout there from the original half joint for the cross beam. Rather than doing that, I'm going to fit the next size up as cleats underneath there and there, and then I can run the crossbar resting on those, and I'll put a cleat here and there, oops, there, so that I can do a cross beam there. I'll glue and screw all those joints, and it seems to me that that is both a lot simpler and stronger than half jointing. These are the same cross as the original beams, but the original ones were about 15-20 millimeters deeper. So by not half jointing, I've actually got more material, and I think those half joints were some of where the movement was happening and it was creaking as you walked on the floor. What I'm still planning to do is put a right angle from this bulkhead to come across, which will mark the lift out section of this floor. It will be fairly close to there, so there'll be just a small bit of infill which will be permanently epoxied into place to stop any joints for dirt to get in. So there'll be a funny shaped piece there that I'll make sure it fits using thickened epoxy, giving me a nice straight edge for a more rectangular lift out section here, which actually includes some useful build space. Still some working out to do where we're going to put the cupboard front, so what I fit initially will be temporary, and we will sort out the cupboard front and the connection to it later. So that's it for today. Next week, whenever the weather is good, I'll be working on the carbon fibre solar supports, and as soon as the solar panels are in place, we can get all the wiring done through to the batteries. That is the highest priority whenever the weather's good. When it's bad, I'll be working more on this floor and finishing off all the final touches around the battery box. So look forward to seeing you next week. Don't forget to like, subscribe, share, comment, and we look forward to seeing you next time. Thanks for watching.